Welcome to this recording of the Activist Lawyer podcast, brought to you from the Granite Podcast Studio in the heart of Newry City. We are delighted that you could join us at Activist Lawyer, a new podcast and online forum where we will be discussing all sorts of matters, including current issues as they unfold. We'll be engaging not only with lawyers, but people who are committed to highlighting and combating injustices and inequalities. We will bring you our thoughts and invite you to share yours. We'll be looking for contributors to our blog at www.activistlawyer.com, as we want your perspective as we unravel and unpack so many important topics. My name is Sarah Henry and I am a solicitor practicing in Newry City. I worked with a human rights firm in Dublin for many years and with a number of rights-based organisations and charities. So today I am delighted to be joined by Sinead Marmion. Hi Sinead.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Not at all, thank you for coming down. So Sinead is a solicitor dealing with asylum and immigration cases primarily. She has an LLM in Human Rights Law, Queen's University, and is fluent in French. She's currently working with Phoenix Law in Belfast, which is a very established and up-and-coming and growing firm. And so, like myself, Sinead works on similar, I suppose, immigration-related issues, family reunions, spouse and fiancé visas, and a lot of the European treaty rights and a lot of the new stuff coming in as a result of Brexit. So Sinead, as well, is also a member of ILPA, which is the Immigration Law Practitioners Association, and I've just joined her on that as one of the conveners of that, so it's exciting for us to work together on that. She's also a committee member of the Law Society's Immigration Practitioners Group and has the responsibility of Phoenix Law's charity committee together with Harry Robinson. God, you're a busy woman, Sinead. And thank you for taking time out of your day to join us here. So we've had a little bit of chat. Sinead would often have me at the end of the phone giving an old rant here.
Always ranting. Always ranting.
Is it just immigration practitioners and people in human rights that have a good rant, or do you think it's across the board?
I don't know. I feel like we're a special breed of ranters.
Well, your firm, Phoenix Law, that you're working in, it's quite a new firm. I think it's only a few years old.
It's only just over 2 years old.
And the amount of work and cases that you've undertaken collectively, and I know your specialism is very, very niche and very, very particular, but really it must be so interesting working within that.
And they're all such amazing lawyers. So I feel really lucky to, have them all around me. And I mean, the cases that go on, you're just like, there's so much happening in this office. There's just so much activity and big cases, and
so wide ranging and such high profile cases. I'd say it's just like a hive of activity constantly. But that's very exciting, and just I suppose you've such a strong media presence, and people become familiar with the individual solicitors' names and certain cases and matters that they're acting on across Ireland. I think there'd be representation as well for a lot of cases in the Republic of Ireland. So interesting. Well, today we're going to focus on, unsurprisingly, immigration related topics. And I think the theme of obviously this podcast is activist lawyer, and we all know where that little phrase came from. And I think our first series, Sinead, we spoke about the language, and it was about language and insults and how the legal profession were really being dealt a heavy blow. So what was your take as a fellow ranter?
As a fellow ranter, well, I was delighted to be called a do-gooder. I can't,
what's wrong with a do-gooder?
I can't believe that it was, said in such a negative way, and you'd almost be hurt by that. But my take on it was just that, it's a wider issue. It's not just about immigration cases and, challenging and calling out the Home Office on their poor decision making, but it's a wider issue of, the rule of law, democracy, as a whole, and, where our country's heading. Yeah.
It's so dangerous, actually, isn't it? Such a dangerous
totally
rhetoric.
Dangerous. It just, it makes me want to work much harder, and it makes me want to stand up even more. Although it is dangerous, and you're obviously going out there and potentially putting a target on yourself, but I think that the ethos, I suppose, of Phoenix Law. You know, what we all do is stand up. If you can't stand up, you're not doing your job.
Yeah, and stand up proudly and openly and, you know, really represent your clients. And I guess that's what anybody working in rights-based areas of law will do. And I think we did speak about that people took it and owned it. This comment. So, of course, to listeners, what we're referring to is Priti Patel and others, not just the Home Secretary, but others referring in a derogatory way to immigration lawyers in particular, but lawyers who really hindered the process and were being made scapegoats for the asylum crisis that the UK is experiencing at the moment, despite the fact that the Tory government have been in power for 10 years and this has been an ongoing issue. But it seems to me, Sinead, I think whenever there's an issue like the pandemic now, or a massive failing in the economy of a country, people turn to migrants.
Yeah.
And why do you think that's the case?
Well, it's that word you said a minute ago, it's scapegoating, isn't it? You know, where the spotlight is on migrants, people that you can visibly see in all the papers on a boat coming into our country. Who are they? They're going to take everything. There's just this whole narrative, and it all is scapegoating. And the reason is it's focusing away for our own inward self-reflection and what our own failings are as a country. And I suppose the government needs to, you know, have somebody to point the blame on. It's always going to be migrants because they don't have a vote. Let's be honest, they don't have a vote. So, you know,
they don't have a voice. Exactly. And I think it's becoming, there seems to be a real brazenness about it though. And despite the fact that they, you know, may have deleted a tweet here and there, they really did not offer up in any way an apology either to the profession or the communities that they've absolutely offended and insulted. And on the contrary, they seem to have gone on to celebrate wins, as they would call it. Like, you know, this week we turned around 3 boats, and it's just every time I see it, I just get so irate. How is that a win? It's so sad that that's, you know, the way we've...
It is, and it's actually a wee bit exhausting to keep looking at this stuff, because it's like this is the narrative that's being pushed and pushed as if it's the truth. There's so many legal errors within what they're even saying. You know, there was one this week, I think, about turning back people to France and Germany who had previously been there, and they'd come to the UK to claim asylum, and they'd said that, you know, people must claim asylum in the first safe country they reach. That's not in the law.
No, it's not. And I've seen that before, and they've used that, and they seem to be using it more, the Dublin, you know, relying on their interpretation of that.
Yeah.
But I recently listened to a show whereby somebody was representing asylum seekers. I think it was a lawyer, but they were saying, again, pointing that out, that you're erring in the law and that is not in fact the case. But it doesn't really matter, because they're a powerful, you know, it's the government after all. They have millions behind them when it comes to marketing, so their messaging will get out there. And it's the same as the Brexit campaign, you know, the Leave campaign. That was a machine, you know, and whether they were spouting out correct information or not, it did not matter. So when people hear about the problems that we have as a result of migrants clogging up the system and the NHS is all down to this, they tend to believe it unless they know the reality. And, you know, so it is so dangerous, this language.
Totally. You know? And knowing the reality, as you say, it's very difficult to do. It's a complex system. The legal system around asylum and immigration law is, I think one judge described it as a labyrinth. You know, it's just completely nuts to navigate, you know, yourself.
I do.
And this is why we're constantly ranting on the phone.
I could never call myself an expert in it, because it just changes so often. And I think, kind of moving on a wee bit, but it's good that I think in Northern Ireland there's a small group of us, and, you know, there's great collaboration there and sharing. Everybody's, you know, maybe specialising a little bit more in another area, so it's nice to share that. But again, I think all of us, all of this got all of our backs up no matter what. And I think the group itself was very responsive, and I know the Law Society of Northern Ireland put out a statement straight away. I think the Bar did as well.
The Bar did too, and the Society was very good to stand up, because, you know, in Northern Ireland we have had our past where human rights lawyers have been targeted and killed.
Yes.
You need to take a stand. I mean, in England, I'm sure you'll have heard of the attack on the lawyer in Duncan Lewis, England's largest immigration firm, and that Priti Patel knew about that through her own government's terrorism investigation unit. She still went on to brief at the Conservative Party conference that there were activist lawyers and frustrating a legal process of returning migrants. It's just so upsetting.
It is.
It's upsetting.
It's hard to get your head around and hard to believe that that's the government who's spouting this information, and it's completely unacceptable and nobody should take it. But I do think the positive thing is that people have grabbed on to, the derogatory in inverted commas terms, and we've run with it, and you can see it on Twitter. People are using it as their handle. So it's great in that respect. And, it's really brought practitioners together. Totally. Whether you practice in human rights or not, people really stood together and said, this is an absolute disgrace. Do not attack our profession. But the other big messaging that I'm seeing this week is a fantastic celebration from the Home Office of, yes, it's an end to free movement.
Delightful.
I can't.
I just don't understand. A lot of people want 2020 over except for immigration lawyers.
We don't want it. We want the transition period. So the big date in our minds as practitioners is always the 31st of December. And I know there's a kind of a grace period after that within which certain applications that would kind of hold on to some of the free movement entitlements can be made. And after that, it's all over. Yep. Sinead, how do you come to terms with this? Because for me, I'm devastated.
I was actually about to say devastated because it means we have to reteach ourselves everything from scratch. And also, that's a selfish reflection of it. But in terms of the clients, I just think there's a huge amount of people that don't know what's coming.
Yeah.
I think that, I'm advising people even now saying, so Brexit happened. We are still in a transition period. After this date, you will have no rights. I'm sorry. I don't know what's going to happen after that.
Apologies. Yeah. And it's the same. This morning I was advising clients who are from Northern Ireland relying on their British passports living in the Republic. And again, of course, this does not just impact people in the UK. This impacts British people across the EU and how their rights are going to be curtailed.
Totally.
Didn't they think of this? But anyway, it's on its way. I hate the messaging. I hate that it's about attracting the brightest and the best and that this is only a positive move. It's much more, they've even gone as far to say it's a more liberal system. We're not just going to attract people based on where they're from, but their skill set. So that makes it a much more fairer system. The reality is we have built up years, decades of case law as well to protect citizens' rights. It's been so well established. It infiltrates all of our lives in many respects that we don't even think about. It's so seamless, the whole prospect of moving freely within the EU. And for that to come to an end is seismic, and it's so difficult to get your head around.
It's huge. And like even within the UK, Northern Ireland, we're so different to the rest of the UK in terms of our what our industries are here and how much we rely on migrant workers, often to do, in quotation marks, the dirty work.
Yeah.
In chicken factories, picking vegetables. I think you said to me earlier about sorting, recycling.
Yeah, absolutely.
All these jobs that we have a huge amount of labour force for that just are the floor is going to be pulled out from in under them.
It will be.
And that's that's local businesses that are going to collapse as a result.
Yeah.
So, and there's no regional adaptation for Northern Ireland compared to the rest of the UK. I mean, migrant workers in London are treated the same as migrant workers in, Dungannon.
Exactly. And there's been no consideration that our closest competitor here, especially us in Uri, is 5 minutes down the road, and absolutely no consideration for border region areas. The whole, even the scheme, the EU settlement scheme, the whole frontier worker permit now, again, no real consideration. So for us in particular, I do think that Northern Ireland is really going to feel this more than because of our geography and our makeup and our huge reliance on migrant workers. And they've been deemed low skilled, these people are building our economy.
Yeah.
I mean, the economy is built on what they're doing, and the fact that so many jobs in the area have been created because of these companies able to grow. And I mean, it just beggars belief that this can be celebrated. And
I mean, if they really want to celebrate, why don't they celebrate all those low skill workers in the NHS that people have been clapping for on a Thursday? Do you know,
exactly.
It's just so
we forget about how that contribution is so valid and so just written off. Really,
totally written off. Low skilled does not mean. What does that mean?
Nothing. I just think it shouldn't be applied. I mean, everybody brings value, and I think it's just a matter of absolute disrespect. And I just don't know what's ahead. I really don't. In terms of for us as practitioners, immigration. I mean, we know the rules that have been. We know a few processes that have been put in place, mechanisms to protect, people who are already here. But none of us know what's around the corner.
This podcast is sponsored by Granite Exchange. Do you need an office or a meeting room space? Granite Exchange is the ultimate serviced office and meeting room facility. Located in the heart of Newry City, it is perfectly placed between Belfast and Dublin. Each office suite is fully furnished and comes with an all-inclusive monthly fee with no long-term contract. All you have to do is show up and switch on. The rest is taken care of. For more information, call 028 3044 2500 or visit www.granite-exchange.com.
So moving on a wee bit from our post-Brexit immigration world, you do a lot of very difficult work as well. And I know years ago, and I was rambling on a bit to Sinead before we started about my time spent in Dublin and dealing in the first area I went into was asylum and refugee law and dealing with unaccompanied minors as somebody who was just fresh out of college. And I have to say, probably every day of life I went home and cried because it was such, difficult work to deal with. So you are dealing in that day in, day out, that type of work. And it's how do you manage it and what type of work are you doing?
So there's a couple of practitioners in Northern Ireland doing this type of work, mainly myself and two other ladies, Barbara and Maria. I'll give them a shout out. They're in the Children's Law Centre and they're fantastic.
Hi, Barbara and Maria.
Hello. So there's a couple of us doing this kind of work. So I love this work. This is why I wanted to be a lawyer, to do this work. But, when you're young and, fresh, you think, I want to be a human rights lawyer. I want to do this work. I want to help people. I want to help children. But then when you're sitting down and, doing these cases, it's a whole different world. It's a real wake-up call as to what's going on in the world and what's going on in other countries. The trauma that people suffer getting here to save their lives, travelling through Europe, travelling across the Mediterranean, being bought and sold. It's just something that you think isn't real but is actually happening all around us. And I don't know, how do I deal with that? I don't know. You just have to fight really hard. You just fight all the time.
And you start to get used, it's hard to say, but you start to get used to the type of work, I suppose, and maybe a little bit, I don't like to say hardened to it, but because it becomes your daily, job, it's what you do, but you're always going to be impacted, in some way because it's hard going.
It is. And but again, you could say like, oh, that's an Eritrean case, so that'll be an alright case because, that's about child conscription in the army. So I'm happy enough with that case. And that's a real, like, really sanitized view of a file, like how it will potentially go. I think this child will get asylum. But behind that, you have a child sitting in front of you, and each child, when you meet them and talk to them, it like breaks your heart all over again because, everyone is different. You can't just set them down to, just another Eritrean case. This is a child that, had hadn't got a future in their own country. They couldn't stay with their family because it would mean no future for them. And just seeing a wee human in front of you that's been through all of that and had the absolute strength to get here. It's
Yeah.
just unbelievable every time you meet a new child.
Absolutely. It just brings back memories for me as well in that type of work. And you'd even go before, in those days it was before the Refugee Appeals Tribunal. I used to work in Dublin, and it was also matter of fact, and the presenting officer was there and they were making a decision, and it was, but because like you say, you knew, whether it was a young person or a child or a person who'd suffered severe abuse, and you got to know the client, and they would have other support mechanisms there. They might have a social worker, and but sometimes they didn't, and they were very lonely individuals who maybe didn't speak the language, and you couldn't just separate yourself. Well, I couldn't. I find it very hard just to separate myself from that and just focus on the legal side of it. So it's difficult. And how I remember, that was years ago. I'm not going to reveal my age, like I'm not that old, but in those days there wasn't any support. How do you think things have changed for practitioners, Sinead, who work in these areas of law?
Definitely, yeah, because in Northern Ireland there's legislation that says that each child should have an independent guardian appointed to advocate for them on their behalf through childcare services, through the trusts, or with their lawyers or at court, just somebody to hold their hand, and all the checks and balances are done for that person. Yeah. And that is that's by Bernardo's runs that service, and I have such a good relationship with the guardians. They're amazing.
Oh, brilliant.
They are amazing people. I've never met such amazing people. And they are, like, if I didn't have them in the case, there would just be that kind of grey cloud sitting over where the child would be brought through the legal processes, but there's no comfort in that. There's no, when a child comes in and I unpick their scars, you just pick everything away, and then they go away into the world again feeling like they've lived everything all over again. So the guardian, helps them through that process, but it's actually helped me learn about trauma, and about how to deal with trauma and how to deal with children with trauma. And it's not just about the legal side of things in this job. You have to know how your work actually affects somebody. And that's not something you're ever taught.
No, it's not.
Ever.
And I do know both of us are members of ILPA. I referred to you in the introduction as being a member, and they have a wellbeing working group, I think it's known as. And I think it's quite a new development.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of burnout in the practice, in immigration practice. And, the good thing about being an immigration lawyer, I mean, if I haven't said anything good already, but the good thing about it is that, you're not really in competition with other lawyers. So it is in your interest to work collectively. And that's the great thing about ILPA, because there is a wider recognition that these cases are really tough mentally on the lawyer.
Yeah.
And us obviously being attacked both ways, from the government.
Yeah.
So it's great to have that, I'm sure. And also you are now a co-convener of our Northern Ireland working group.
I'm delighted. There's 4 of us now. So yeah, it's great. We'll give a wee shout out to Carolyn and Maria as well.
Yeah.
Hi. So that's fantastic. And I get what you're saying. The collaboration, if we didn't have it, I couldn't do this job. And I moved from the Republic, or practicing in Dublin. I had a break and then started here, and I didn't know really anybody. And in such a short space of time, it's been lovely to get to know, because I came back here and I started working in Northern Ireland in 2013. And at that time, as an immigration solicitor in Belfast, there weren't many of us. There was a little, and so now there seems to be, quite a few new faces and people who are specialising in different areas. So it's lovely to see. And it's great to have that collaboration, because, as you said, it's a tough area to work in. It's a labyrinth, as you referred to earlier. And but even for your own peace, your own mind and your own state of health, it's important to share your work, share the load, and also make sure that you're, looking after yourself as well, because they're difficult cases, especially the type of work that you do. So just at the moment, is there anything interesting that you're working on in this wonderful area of immigration? And
probably I have a case that's actually it's an EU settlement scheme case, our favourite thing, and the rules basically state that you can bring your unmarried partner here from another country if you're a person of Northern Ireland, but when you go to do the application, it doesn't actually let you.
Yeah.
So the IT geniuses and lawyers mixing are never good. But so I'm trying to challenge that at the minute. So I have a client who's here, her partner who she's been with for 5 years, lived in America together. He's now in South Africa and they want to get married. They've had to change their wedding date umpteen times. They've not got very much money left because they both lost their jobs during the pandemic. Gosh. And yeah, it's just a difficult case because it does actually affect probably quite a large number of people.
It will. What Sinead, I suppose what we're referring to there, the EU settlement scheme was introduced, I think, in March 2019 to offer protection to EU citizens and their family members who are already in the UK. It ends, you have to be here by the 31st of December, and then there's a grace period up until the 30th of June, and there's kind of extensions depending on your case. But only on the 24th of August, they opened this up to relevant people from Northern Ireland and their family members for the first time, based on the back of the Emma and Jake D'Souza campaign and case, which was really fantastic for so many of our clients. And you've been busy, Sinead, I've been busy. Yeah. So many of us had different, but it's only now, and we don't have much time to do all of this. We're like November, and we're now noticing, technicalities, issues like you've just mentioned there. Do you challenge this? Is there time? Would you submit a fresh application in the hope that the Home Office will change their policy and just grant it? So I have a feeling in some of these cases, we've a few difficult ones where people are overseas and haven't been living in Northern Ireland for some time, and there seems to be a sense that they were trying to block those applications coming through. So although this was fantastic news, and it really is, when it came down to the actual practice, it turned out to be very different, which isn't really that surprising, is it?
No, and I think with a window of opportunity between August and December in the middle of a pandemic, and you're talking about people moving country, it's never going to be straightforward. And
the stress from clients as well, I'm sure you're feeling this too, COVID thrown into the mix. I would have had people saying, we'll travel in December. So that gives me a little bit of time. That was said to me months ago. And now it's, no, we need to get there really soon. We need pressure on this application. So you're sensing not only Brexit is really pressurising practitioners and individuals and clients, but COVID into the mix with the prospect of maybe more restrictions in different countries. Every country is different, and it's such a balancing act. It is a nightmare, really.
It is. Like, we can't even decide on our own restrictions.
No, exactly.
And we're different within the UK. I mean, look at all the differences.
So it's a minefield. So just as well, you are, I think, activist lawyer to the core, not only in your day job, but just I have seen you sharing some stories about the work that you and a few others have been doing in respect of refugees and asylum seekers. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
I had a mad notion for going to Calais camp with some of the guardians I referred to earlier in Bernardo's. So this is actually quite a sad story. There's a sad background to this. I've always wanted to go to Calais, but this kind of made me want to go even more. So we had a young person who had come here from Eritrea, and he'd spent years trying to even get here through Europe, an awful one of those boat journeys that you see. And he got his status in the UK. He was granted refugee status, which is your future. But he still had his family left behind. He had younger brothers and stuff that were trapped in Sudan and, working on farms as children, effectively like slaves. and he just was really wanting to get his family back. So he decided to go to London, try and gather up a lot of money, work really hard, get his life in order here first, and he put an awful lot of pressure on himself to do that. The Guardians were still in touch. They used to go over and see him a lot. But his mental health took a real toll, and unfortunately he took his own life in August this year, which was really devastating blow, because he was such a lovely young man and a pleasure to work with, and the Guardians were so gutted to the core because they're his only people here. So we decided that we would go to Calais, where he had once been, and on the anniversary of him being there, which was actually this week. But because of all the quarantining and restrictions, it became impossible. But we have raised a lot of money. We have gone towards Care for Calais charity, which is a fantastic charity, supports volunteers going out there, provides donations, ensures that people in the camp have fresh water, warm clothes, mobile phones that are charged and a bit of money on them so they can contact their family members if they get separated. Fantastic charity, and Maria, who I was referring to, was actually out there with them at one stage too. So we were going to go and do that, and it's still in our minds to do. It just hasn't been the right time, but we are still collecting donations. So there's priority items. There's a list of priority items that are needed, and we're still, I think, raising money. But we are also sending stuff off in batches.
Okay.
There's a batch in January due to go, and I think there's potentially more depending on the donations and stuff.
Where could people maybe donate, even items or funds?
I suppose just get in contact with myself.
With yourself, okay. Well, we'll leave Sinead's details on the post accompanying this podcast so that people can, because that's so amazing and so worthwhile, and especially that story, you know, God, it really brings it home that the suffering and the mental suffering that people have after they get here, it's not the end of the story. You know?
It never is. And a lot of people who do come here, they've just been pushing and pushing forward for years to get here, and it's always that future date, get to the UK, get to my family member, or, you know, get to safety, get to somewhere I can be safe. And then once they do stop, the trauma of everything that's just happened hits in a huge wave, and the services aren't there. You know, I see it happening to all the kids that are just even in the asylum system, waiting for the Home Office to decide their
that
case.
In itself is just soul destroying and has such a huge impact, you know, across the country. People in direct provision for 7, 8, 9, 10 years. I mean, and children there too. And across Northern Ireland, it's awful. It doesn't bear thinking about. But that's a fantastic, so it's Care for Calais is the organisation. That's amazing. And it's great that you and Maria and people are getting involved in that. So, I mean, we'll wrap up there. I mean, that's a lot that we could probably sit here all day and talk about immigration matters. I mean, we covered the celebratory issues like at the end of free movement, which is obviously something, you know, to celebrate and all that brings. We'll probably come back again, Sinead, and discuss what in fact it did bring, and if we are still celebrating that,
and measure the size of the bags under our
we'll do
eyes.
that. But look, it's been so lovely to have you here today. I'm so glad you came, and we'll be in contact a lot more in the coming days. But thanks so much, Sinead, and thank you everybody for listening. And tune in for our next episode, and also remember to follow us on our blog page where you'll be able to even contribute yourself some written pieces. So thanks again. Thanks, Sinead.
Thanks very much.
This podcast was recorded in Granite Podcast Studio. Interested in starting up your own podcast but don't know how? Granite Podcast Studio can help. Record your podcast in our state-of-the-art studio, which is based in the heart of Newry City. Our studio has cutting-edge and user-friendly technology and can seat up to 4 people. We also provide an editing service for our team, using your guidance and editing notes to provide you with a flawless finished product, leaving your listeners wanting more. For more information on how you can get started, visit www.granitepodcaststudio.com.